Okay, so you're stuck with me twice in a row, but you got a really great guest here. So we have a lot to talk about in the marketing world, and this is one of the great brands. It's a personal brand. It's probably more than a personal brand. So I have 100 things to ask you, including, by the way, are these, just so we're clear, these Crocs that you're wearing, these are your own?
My own as opposed to borrowed?
No, no, no. This is your personal brand, right?
Yes, I'm, what do you call it? I license a particular pair.
And what does your pair do that's different than everybody else's pair?
My pair is actually for the kitchenware, so they don't have the holes on them.
Right.
And they're a little higher up, and there's not the slots in here, so if you were actually washing the floors or cleaning something, it wouldn't slosh in. And this back thing's a little higher. But I find they're a little warm, so I don't wear them unless I'm actually in the kitchen and need protection.
In the kitchen. So tell us, though, how you think about your personal brand, and how much time do you actually think about the brand that is you versus what you're actually doing every day, which is restaurants and products and TV shows and all this other stuff. How much do you think about the brand and what it's supposed to mean to the public?
It was actually the secondary plan. The first plan was to open a restaurant, become very comfortable in New York, and enjoy my experience and love it, and find and identify customers who like our food and understand how we want them to enjoy it, and we can have a nice two-way road where the customers like what they're getting and I like making it for them and I feel good about it. And then TV came along, and all of a sudden I was thrust onto a soapbox that, although I hadn't prepared for it, I seemed to have been kind of ready for. So after a couple of years of that and opening a couple of restaurants with my partner Joe Bastianich, we decided, well, let's think about what it is that people want from us. And we know, first of all, that they want spaghetti. Second of all, they want a glass of wine. And third of all, they want, I guess, not necessarily truth, but they want honesty. And when we sit down and think about a new restaurant or a new menu, we think to ourselves, can we describe what this experience is in one or two sentences? And if we can't, then we stop and reconsider it, because people don't have time to listen to 3 paragraphs when they decide what they want to go out and have for dinner. So then we think, all right, what is it that we want to be famous for? Well, we want to be famous for Italianness. We want to be famous for authenticity. We want to be famous for happy, joyful table experiences. And we kind of want to be famous for yum.
How malleable do you think your brand is? You decided, for example, tell us a story. You decide that you were going to endorse a pair of Crocs.
Correct.
How does that happen?
Well, I started wearing them before I discovered that there was endorsement packages out there. And because they were so comfortable, which is for me the clear fundamental decision-making process in what I wear, it's not because I've been studying Vogue Uomo Italiano, but they called me and said, listen, what do you think about this? And I said, well, that's a great idea. I happen to wear them all the time. As a matter of fact, I almost wear no other shoes. So there was truth to that it was not me saying, oh yes, I drive a Ferrari. Even though I like Ferraris, I find a Cinquecento more comfortable than a Ferrari. And although a Ferrari is a powerful vehicle and I'll happily get in one every now and then, I don't think of it as like the best vehicle to drive. So I wouldn't sponsor her or be a spokesperson for Ferrari. Crocs, on the other hand, easier.
How many restaurants can you ultimately have? Does it matter to you as a chef who is known for going into your restaurants and being there? Does it matter how many you have? Is there an upper limit to what you can have?
I don't know. At 22, I can tell you that at 14, I didn't think I would have 16.
And what was the lesson?
The reason we open restaurants is not because we have an incredible growth program. We don't have any kind of attack. What we open restaurants for is to make sure that the good people that have been trained and worked through our system don't suddenly go work for Drew Nepron or Danny Meyer. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, if that's where their growth is going to go, then that's good. But the reason we open restaurants is because there's a really great sous chef and a really great assistant somm or #2 wine person or general manager ready to be. And we say to them, well, you know, you guys are just about ready. Is there something that you're fascinated with, and do you want to cobble together an interesting idea that you can describe in 2 sentences or less that will become an experience or destination restaurant?
Your restaurants currently are on the East Coast and the West Coast.
Yes.
Correct?
Well, Vegas is not really the West Coast, but it's close.
Close. Could you open a restaurant in Chicago? Could you open a restaurant in Dallas?
I'm going to open a restaurant in Chicago in 8 weeks.
In 8 weeks?
Yes.
So do you think, is there anywhere in the country you think that the brand doesn't translate?
I think it's less a question of the brand translating, and it's more a question of, is there enough critical mass to be the kind of, what distinguishes a lot of restaurants in New York City from restaurants around the country is your profitability goes up by at least 20% just by the fact that you have a critical mass of people. As we like to say when we're talking about the idea of focus grouping a menu, is the beauty of New York City is even if 4 million people hate you, there are 7 million left.
Right.
So you don't, it's not that you insult people, but you don't have to do something you think, maybe I don't want to have salmon with lentils, tiramisu, and cheese ravioli with pomodoro sauce on any menu that I happen to make. And that's because those items have been known to entice even the least excited diner into at least ordering something while they're waiting an hour and a half before they go into Cats.
How
Not the deli, the play.
How far can you get away from Italian food? Can you?
I think Italian food is kind of a catch-all that is misinterpreted as being one thing when there are 21 regions, so each of them is very specific. That said, I love Italian food, but I'm a big fan of Thai food and Vietnamese food. I'm probably not going to open a Vietnamese restaurant. But we did open a Spanish one. I went to high school in Spain, so I'm pretty familiar with it. And if you have experience in it, you could be great. And I think that I'm not against it, but I'm not looking to develop concept after concept after concept just to see if I can beat it. It's more like if there's something I feel really good about and there's a chef partner and a general manager and wine partner that are also fascinated by that. I mean, we're working on a Sicilian project right now. That's as far from Italy as I think I'm going to go.
Right. How personally wrapped up do you think your brand is in the success of each restaurant? And I asked that I remember going to Otto, I have to tell you, and I didn't know it was yours. I went to Esca, and I didn't know it was yours. Now, maybe I should have. And then I would go around telling people, well, I really like Esca. What a great restaurant. Meaning, what percentage of the people you think that are walking in the door have either seen you on TV, they've seen your tweets, they've read about you, versus I heard they make good pizza?
I would say hopefully about 70%, but it's a little different. Maybe when we started, that was the thing. I mean, we wanted to make sure that at each restaurant there were items on the menu that even if you didn't care anything about the owners or the chefs, you happened to be in that location, the room looked inviting enough, and you saw something you recognized, like spaghetti, on the menu, and you're like, we could go in here. So I would say at this point, being that the media has changed and I'm actively involved in social media to a certain extent, and I'm on TV every damn day, they're going to hear about it. But that you didn't makes me happy. That you didn't know it was one of my restaurants and you enjoyed it makes me even happier. So that's a good thing.
TV. Let's talk about TV. Let's talk about what that's done to your brand. Is that, do you believe, the singular tipping point twist in your entire business in terms of creating the brand and franchise that is?
I don't
Mario
know.
Batali?
I mean, it's easy because I've been on since Food Network was very, very young. And what the Food Network and television in general gives you is a soapbox to espouse your either thoughtful ideas or your lack of thoughtful ideas. And because I wasn't having to create content per se, that I merely, and I claim this to this day, we merely interpret 2,000 years of joyous gastronomic history from the Italian peninsula. So it's something that it's not up to me to rewrite the book every year or two or make the new movie or the hot video or the pop song like a lot of artists are. But it's up to us to kind of hold the standards high and make sure that the customer feels that they know what they can get when they come in. Being on TV gives more people the opportunity to hear me and talk about that and maybe disdain foamy stuff from a place that shouldn't be making foamy stuff. But it's really about reassuring people that what we're going to do is what we're going to do. And me talking about it just adds to that, I would guess, on TV or not, or in a media situation like this.
How much time do you spend literally every day dealing with something TV related?
I do the Chew Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. I get in at 7:30 and I leave at 1:30.
And then how much time do you spend of your day either at a restaurant?
Probably another 3 or 4 hours, depending on the day and depending on if I'm going to sit down and actually eat a meal after being there for a day, which adds 2 more hours.
And what do you like when you're at the restaurant? What do you like to do?
I like to stand in the kitchen and watch the food come up and watch the flow of the expediting, watch, You know, who's breaking all the glasses, find out if the sauce has been seasoned right, if they're going about the same steps of service. I mean, when I can walk into a restaurant at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I can tell by the smell whether something's wrong or right, and it's almost always right. But there's adjustments that have to be made, and whether a tomato season changes, or whether they decided to change olive oil and didn't ask me, or whether they, for some reason, got shiny-eyed and thought that the 36-month-old parm was actually better than the 22-month-old parm to actually eat off the table. It's because some marketer came into them and said, you got to get this older parm, it's better, it's more expensive. And they don't realize that the younger parm is better to eat by hand. The older parm has a much more intense flavor for grating on things. But if you're going to put it on a cheese board, you don't want the older parm, it's dry. If they become confused by that, I'm the one who helps them re-understand it.
Would you do TV for free? Meaning, is it such a great...
Yes, I would.
Yes, you would. Okay. Just between us girls
Just
here.
Just between us.
When you think about advertising, do you advertise at all? Any of your restaurants advertise?
In Vegas?
Or you're such a big deal that, I mean, I still can't get a reservation at Babo.
Right, I mean,
everybody, if you can give everyone instructions on how they can get the reservation, that would probably be...
Walk in and smile.
That works?
Every restaurant in this town, as full as it gets, has no-shows and people who change their plans at the last minute, or people that change their plans and don't even bother to tell us. If you walk in, early side, middle side, late side, anytime there's a chance. And know that also you're swinging. And if you strike out, you strike out. It's not death. But if you go to a place like Babo, within 4 blocks, there's 6 or 7 great restaurants. So if you're just all right with that, it's okay. You walk in, you smile, say, listen, we didn't have a reservation. I saw Mario at the stock exchange. He said if I came in and I smiled, you'd give me a table. They'll try to figure something out for you.
Okay.
We want happy people to come to our restaurant. It's when they come in and lie about their reservation and say no one ever gave them a reservation code and that it was something in this and that, and they come in at a time when you know they couldn't possibly have a reservation. Then they don't get the same loving response. It's more like, you know, sir, I'm sorry, we're fully booked. Now, let me see if I can work you in.
Okay, while I'm on that, and then I want to talk about advertising, now we're getting practical. If you have an American Express card, do you really actually get better seats?
Not in my restaurant.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to know.
But you know, those people, the people that need the black American Express card, they need to feel that seat's better. So of course it's better.
Okay.
You can tell the difference sometimes. If you just look at the remote, there's a black American Express card right there. They have a much comfortable, bigger chair like this one sitting in our restaurant.
Let's go back to advertising. You said you don't advertise except for Vegas, is that right?
Correct.
And you don't advertise because you fill every seat?
Right. It's a supply and demand issue, and in New York City, the only time that we would probably try to figure out an advertisement, and in all honesty, quite frankly, at this point, social media is advertising, and you don't have to go for a group of people that have been decided that this is who reads this, watches this, or listens to this. In New York City, our supply and our demand isn't quite up to what we need. There'll be an empty table at any restaurant at any given day at any hour, but that's probably because someone didn't show up or there was a little gap. But at the end of the day, kind of between 6:30 and 9:30, 10 o'clock, which would be the full extent of dinner service in even Chicago, and between 6 and 7:45 would be all of it in Topeka. Right. Like we get a third turn, we get at 10 o'clock, 5-6 nights a week in all of our restaurants.
Okay, so that's the advertising side, but let's talk about the PR side, because you mentioned social media, and you obviously have a huge PR presence, even coming to a place like this at some level. Hopefully these folks will go out and go to Babo with a smile on their face, and hopefully leave with a smile on their face, at least get a table, and then have a smile on their face. You have how many followers now on Twitter?
500,000.
500,000? And what are you doing on Twitter that you think is helping your business?
I'm engaging people that have questions about where they're eating, what they're doing, how I might help them simplify their cooking techniques, and I'm giving them an answer in 140 characters or less. I've actually done an ossobuco recipe in 140 characters or less. And it's just kind of fun. It's a challenge, but it's a way that they feel they can engage with me, and I feel that I can engage with them. And every now and then a troll comes at me, and I really give them a slap in front of everybody, and it's kind of funny. Because they came at me in a very malicious way, and I get to say, maybe you should go back down to your basement at your mom's house and put your underwear back on or something like that. And it's clear exactly where our relationship is. They don't really love me, and I'm trying to figure out why they don't come to my restaurant.
But what are you trying to do to those people? Not the guy in the basement, but meaning, are you trying to put your Twitter followers butts in the seat at the restaurants? Are you trying to get them to buy your cookware? Are you trying to get them to buy your cookbooks, to watch your TV show? What is the goal when you think about the brand that, this goes back to sort of the earlier question, the brand that is?
Yes.
To all.
We're trying to get them to engage in some level with whatever part of my business that they're interested in. If they live in Detroit and can't get to one of my restaurants, maybe they can buy my gelato. Or maybe they want to know why I particularly sponsor this particular brand of pots and pans. And it's because I'm not slapping my name on commercial goods out of, you know, some Western province in China. I'm actually designing my pots and pans. Then I can tell them in all honesty, yes, this is a little bit more expensive, but this is the kind of pot or pan that you will give to your children because it's made of cast iron and coated with enamel. It also, if you leave it on too long because Aunt Marty decided she needed another Negroni and you kind of lost track of time, the enamel causes things not to scorch and burn in a burnt way. It just starts to stick a little bit. And if you're cooking it slowly enough, as I recommend in the recipes and the books that you may have bought, then you can scrape it off with a nice wooden spoon and it results in better cooking for you, which means your life may improve. That's why I'm on social media.
There's no more questions to be asked. Break it down though for us. If you think of your brand or the business that is Mario Batali, it's the restaurants, which I'm assuming are
Number one.
Number one, but is that 75% of the business? Then there's books, there's TV, there's product. What is the sort of breakdown? I don't know if it's a revenue breakdown, a profit breakdown, or just a mental space breakdown.
In my mental space breakdown, I still put the restaurants at 80%. And Italy, it kind of falls into that same group. Then books and TV and personal appearances are the next 15. And then 5 is, you know, whatever comes your way. You see what happens.
What other products do you think we might see you get into?
Well, I'm in pasta and sauce and gelato. I can't really be in wine. There's a problem if you have liquor license. If you have a liquor license, you really can't own a winery.
Huh.
Or something along those lines, and that's okay.
What's the craziest thing somebody's come to you? I'm sure that people pitch you every day. They want your name on something.
Yes.
You don't have a great story for us?
There's edible underwear out there that wants to have Mario Batali's name on it. Spaghetti flavored edible underwear.
For Italy?
They didn't describe to me where they were going to sell it.
Where they were going to sell. Do you want to? You did a production for PBS.
Yes.
Was that a success in your mind? And the reason I ask is, do you think that you will do additional productions that are your own productions like that in the future, more of almost like a documentary style kind of thing, as opposed to Iron Chef?
The public TV model requires that you bring all of the product to them and give it to them for free. Then they put it on the air. So you need to sell your sponsorships for people who get to buy some of that real estate in the 2.5 minutes before and the 2.5 minutes after. And although people will say they want to buy, sometimes they won't. So it's not necessarily a profit center, a PBS show, but it's a great vehicle to selling books, which is why a lot of chefs, when they do a PBS series, will give up their book advance mistakenly to help fund that production. So probably not much more PBS, although I love the people that watch it. I would say right now we're working on developing a production company that will create short format digital fun about food, wine, travel, and all the things that I do. And not necessarily selling anything, but just promoting the idea of joy and curiosity and exploration.
How much does it all have to be around you? And when I ask that question, I think of Martha Stewart, and I think of companies that were built around an individual, and it was an individual brand. And yours is an individual brand. Is in your mind, do you say to yourself, you know what, at some point, it can't just be, I don't want it to be about me? Or do you say, you know what, I always want it to be about me, and I'm going to go to the grave with it?
I think my angle at this point is to find amongst the chefs in my program, in my restaurants, helping them find their media voice is almost more important than me continuing with mine. I want them to have the opportunity. Not all of them are ready. Not all of them speak in 3-sentence paragraphs. Not all of them read. So they don't really speak as well as they could or should. But that said, it would be enjoyable for me at 53 to now start handing a lot of this stuff off. I don't really plan on selling my company. I plan on giving each individual restaurant to all the chefs and the general managers that own it. And they can pay me out over time in some kind of a sale, but not necessarily like I'm not looking for my IPO. I'm not looking for my sellout moment,
right.
which is either a flaw or, much to the chagrin of my partner, Joe Bastianich, who would just die to do that.
What other chefs do you admire, not necessarily strictly for their food, but from a brand perspective right now? Do you go, you know what, they're really clever. I look at what they're doing, I go, wow.
I like Jamie Oliver.
Mm-hmm.
I think what he's done is really interesting and really fun. I like Rick Bayless. I think he's taken the model as kind of the intellectual component of the true spectacular cooking in Mexico and really kind of got a hold of it. I think Michael Chiarello does a good job. You know, and then there's the fancier ones that don't necessarily want to make as big a business, but have created remarkable brands like Eric Repair here in New York or Daniel Boulou. Like that French business model, when they get 3 Michelin stars, they're kind of done. And now they're realizing there's a lot of stuff for them to do, and it's interesting to watch them because they're very sharp and they're still very much about the food.
Okay, so that's a real, you just brought up a really interesting issue though. If you have 3 Michelin stars, can you create a large scale business? Meaning, is it authentic to have a chef who's not in the kitchen?
Well, that's interesting because 10 years ago, 3 Michelin stars would not have been given to a restaurant whose chef was not in the kitchen every night. And a good friend of mine named Massimo Bottura, who has a restaurant that would fit on this stage called La Francescana in Modena, spends a lot of time in the world going around and meeting and doing all these kind of cerebral events that have kind of become the hipness of the post-Reni Redzepi world.
Right.
And when you see all that and you know that all of these ideas and all of these thoughts are very interesting, and it's important for some chefs to really get out there because that's how they're kind of promoting. I think the introduction of the San Pellegrino Awards and the kind of clubby feeling that has changed people's minds about it, because it's not necessarily so Michelin-y, but it's still a very highly watched tiering of people. So the argument could be that he's out there working for that tier as well, but you can't do that in your own restaurant. You have to do that in the world.
Do you worry that either patrons or from a brand perspective, people will ever say, you know what, he's not in the kitchen all the time. He's stretched too thin. I see him on TV. I see him selling this and that, and it's just, it's hard. It changes the perception of the brand. Is that something you ever think about?
Well, there's 2 answers, and one is from Paul Bocuse and the other is from Alain Ducasse. When people asked him when he was in the dining room, who's cooking here? He says, the same people that cook when I'm back there. And then Alain Ducasse says, well, what do you think about your restaurants when you're not there? And his answer is, I'm in all my kitchens all the time.
And that's the answer.
And the answer is that Bill Boeing stopped building planes literally before the first one ever got off the ground, but it's still Boeing. You don't doubt that Boeing put together a great program, and you don't doubt the safety or comfort of one of the planes. If I thought that a restaurant wasn't doing as well as I thought it would be, then I would go there and I would make sure everything was right. I'd be there more often at 10 o'clock than at 5:30, and I would fix it.
Have there been instances where you had a restaurant that wasn't going the way you wanted it to go?
Well, it's kind of more like micro-management. You hear something or someone says, you know, I didn't enjoy this dish, and I go in and I find out what the root of the problem is. A lot of people are going to tell you whatever they think all the time, and you have to kind of hear through the white noise what seems to possibly be a problem. And then you go in the restaurant wide-eyed and ready to be curious and not judging, but not throwing anyone under the bus, and get to the fundamental issue, which is you go and you taste it. You taste it and then you cook it with them. And the way I teach cooks how to cook is I say, all right, listen, here's how we're going to do this dish. Here's the recipe and here's what it is. I'm going to make it and you're going to watch. We're going to make it together. We're going to make it together and I'm going to watch. And then the 4th time, I'm going to walk away and I'm going to come back and we're going to taste it. If during any of those 4 steps you fail, we just start over. And after 5 times, if you haven't got it, we consider you for a different position.
I got 2 more questions, then we're going to try to open up for the audience. The first is this. Talk about a brand that had a mighty fall. Polidine. What do you think of that? What do you think went wrong there? Is that a brand that you think could have been fixed? What does that say about the whole cooking world?
I think she got a lot of bad advice from her team in the way that the whole thing was spun. I think that when you're asked to come in and do a deposition in a lawsuit of a restaurant that you only own a small piece of, you should probably stick to the issue and just deal with it. Whether Paula Deen ever said the N-word or ever thought about it, isn't why they took her down. They took her down because it was time to take her down. Not because she did anything wrong, but there was a lot of knives being sharpened at her expense due to poor media management. If you're going to say you're going on Matt Lauer, you have to go on Matt Lauer. You can't not show up, which would have been the explanation that might have helped her. At the end of the day, she's a good person. She's going to be back, I'm sure. People love a lot of everything about her.
One other question. We are at the New York Stock Exchange. About 2 years ago, you made a comment about Wall Street. I don't know if you remember this comment about Wall Street executives and bankers, and many of whom are obviously patrons of your restaurants, but you said they were responsible for a lot of bad things. You then took that back. Tell us, just walk us through the sort of PR marketing side of what happens. I just want to know.
Were you there?
I was not at the time lunch, but you were there.
Well, I can give you a long, remarkably well thought out defense.
I don't want the defense.
Or I can say the comments were regrettable and I feel like a dumbass.
But you know what I want to know? I want to know what happened afterwards. So you make that comment. No, but this is almost a marketing lesson for everybody here, because I think you did a marvelous job with it, actually, and you came in on the other side even better than ever. And so the question is, how did it happen? What did you do?
We were in a panel with illustrious people like Jesse Eisenberg and Seth Meyers and like six
and
really
Mario
smart
Batali,
people.
come
and
on.
Me, right. And they said, well, listen, we were debating who was going to be Time Man of the Year. And, you know, everyone says something really smart, and I say what I say, which is, you know, I noticed in looking through the past copies that it wasn't always a hero, but that the person who changed the news the most this year might have been someone who we might look back at and think that they didn't do what they were supposed to do or do a bad job. And you can't mention the names of ex-fascist dictators without feeling the repercussions, and that was the lesson I learned. I'm not even going to say their names now, because it'll be a bad scene. But my misinterpretation of that debate was that it was just us.
Right.
And then some journalists jumped up and said, well, what do you say? What do you mean? I said, I didn't mean that. You heard me say that. And I left. And they figured out that's what I wanted to say.
And then what happened?
Well, then my partner calls me and says, do you know what's going on out here? I'm like, out where, Joe? Where are you? I'm over at my house. He said, out here on the street. Here.
Right.
He said, there's a boycott. People aren't coming to our restaurants. I'm like, why? He said, well, what did you say at the Time Magazine Man of the Year thing? I said, well, let me get back to you. Hold on. Hey, what did I say? What did I say that they were so upset about? And that was, you know, it was a big thing. And in all justice, you vote with your dollars, and I took my lumps, and I apologized, and it was stupid. And at the end of the day, you're accountable for everything you say in the public space. And so you have to be attentive to that, and you have to constantly be thinking about the best way to present your brand without insulting people.
Well, I'll tell you presented it very well. Thank you for this conversation.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. We're going to open it up for... We're going to open it up for questions from the audience. I'm hoping that we have some more than we had for the last panel, and I'm sure we will, given how enthusiastic Mario has been in all of this. As I'm looking around and I'm not seeing any hands. Who is going to break the ice here? We have one hand in the back there. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, so this is actually from one of our followers, Katrina Klyer, and she wants to know, Mario, what is the most memorable tweet that you've received and why?
It's the angry people that tweet at you to either expand their numbers or to tell you how they honestly feel about you. Good?
I think we had another question right here. Sir, yes.
Mario.
Yes, sir.
Huge fan, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Two questions for you. One real quick. If you can mention a brand or not, what's your favorite canned whole tomatoes to make sauce with?
That's a very common tweet, too.
Yes.
The San Marzano brand from Muti is the one that I'm using right now. But keep in mind, tomatoes, like olive oil, change every year. So what you want to do is you want to go taste them right around the end of November to find out which one is your brand this year. Because they harvest the whole field of olives just like they harvest the whole field of tomatoes. And the only way to do it is to take them out of that can, and as weird as it is, just take a bite of one without putting anything on it, and then put a bite of them with a little bit of salt on it. And that will tell you where the acidity is, where the brightness is, where the sweetness is, and whether it's going to work for you. But taste 2 or 3 in a row because that's the informed decision. But you should make it every year and then stick with it for the year.
I was told there are different grades of San Marzano. Just the fact that it says San Marzano doesn't mean
Well, no, San Marzano is also a varietal, so there might be San Marzano from Iperia, Wisconsin, and you're probably not going to want to buy a tomato from there.
Right. Second question. As you continue to grow your empire, and your name appears on everything from slotted spoons to ready-to-serve ossobuco sold at Costco in the frozen section, joking, it wouldn't end up there. But as you begin to expand that empire and your name appears on more brands, how do you make sure that your brand doesn't get degraded over a period of time, as we've seen with so many brands that once they become massive and get different product lines and different SKUs, all of a sudden the quality goes down.
Right.
How do you ensure that stays?
Well, that's a common mistake, and basically it's that you start with a great recipe, just like you do in a little restaurant, and then you try to upscale it after you get your big critical success, and all of a sudden you realize that you can't keep up with the volume by buying the same things that you used to buy, and now you have to buy them of lesser quality so that you can get them and still get the job done to meet the demand, which is a fallacious and silly way to look at it, because if the demand starts to get products that shouldn't have been there in the first place, suddenly they're no longer valuable and they lose everything. So my move with the food world is so far that I've worked on a couple of things that I know have a better shelf stability than others. So I have jarred tomato sauce. I got out of the cheese business. I got out of that kind of home meal replacement thing because I just couldn't get my hands around how to make it perfect. I'm in gelato and pasta sauce right now and spaghetti and possibly olive oil. But my bigger move is not necessarily chasing individual categories on the shelf. It's more like I want to own the shelf. So Italy is a much bigger brand move for me because it's going to be that I embrace all things that are great in our store and yet have almost no responsibility to keeping them up, because in fact, if something comes in the store and we don't like it, we take it off the shelf. So it gives me a broader platform to work with. It allows me to share the kind of joy in choosing some of those small ingredients, like the muti tomatoes that I was just talking about, and bring them to a market in a way that is better for everybody and also more scalable. Like, I know that I can buy all the muti tomatoes. We can take everything they made and we'll sell them all. And I'll find another product, whether it's a kind of olive or the right caper. And we find that, and those people make it in their world in the way that they're accustomed to, and we help them by reaching all of the marketing that they should. But they don't necessarily have to chase the product to get the amount that they want for their store. Make sense?
Ma'am.
Hi, I just want to let you know that my favorite part of Italy is the bookstore. That's what a geek I am, but it's quiet back there, and they're books that are not just recipes, but really easy ways to speak Italian conversationally, and just all kinds of stuff. I enjoy it so much. So I'd love to hear anything you want to share more about content strategy beyond recipes. Like, what do you want to share with all your followers, and how's that sort of evolved, your idea of content?
In books or in social media, or both?
Any content, yeah.
Right.
What sort of things do you want to share with them?
I think people are as fascinated about the restaurant experience as they are about the cooking experience at this point, and they want to know how to do it better. And that's fundamentally my follower anyway. So my joy is helping them understand where these products come and why, in fact, in America, we should probably be paying more for our groceries, because we want to have the best thing possible. And the way that they do it in Europe, particularly Spain and Italy and France, is the small producers always rewarded, because they need to be, small farming needs to make a living. So if you can find these small farmers and support them, first of all, you're doing good. Second of all, you're getting better produce. But unfortunately, the third part of that is it's probably going to cost you a little bit more. And that fascination with finding those producers and those odd melons and the strange botarga that they only sell in one market, that's what I want to share with people, so that they know that it's probably around them. If you go to the Ohio or Iowa State Fair, there's probably something that is so delicious and geospecific that's being served right there, right next to the Indian fry bread, that you're like, man, this is unbelievable. And I just want people to look at it with that curiosity, with that fascination, and also with the payoff that they can identify it and know that they can trust their own eyes. So I'm more the shepherd than the actual guide. I'm going to show you the way, but you're going to go your own way as well. So that's the kind of content I think customers are looking for from me, and that's the kind of stuff that makes me happy. It's in addition to a classic cooking idea, but it's finding all that stuff.
Can we get her a mic? Thanks.
What is your philosophy on organic versus inorganic? Would you ever consider endorsing more organic foods, for example?
I think that is informed by the first question. I think organic is a really good idea. I'm not sure what level organic you can have, and I'm not really sure or guaranteed about the process of achieving organic status. So you just have to be as careful as you can. But I mean, keep in mind, if there's a 6,000 acre farm blowing pesticides for 10 miles, there's nothing that can be organic. Because 6,000 acres is a big piece of land, it's a large volume of pesticide to put somewhere, and whether it goes into the aquifer, or whether it goes up into the sky, or whether it just blows around on the wind, it just makes it tougher. So although small farming is where you want to go, you're not guaranteed that you're getting more than what you can eat or taste. That said, I think organic makes a lot more sense. Certainly eating pesticides is low on my list of top 10s.
We have a couple more questions. The cheap seats in the back.
Hi, you seem like a natural, but I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what it takes to build your brand and how much of that you're really driving yourself, or sort of the team of people that you have around you, because you've really entered so many new markets. It's incredible, to think of all the areas that you've developed. And are those sort of, was it your own vision, or have you had some additional input?
My team right now in total is 2,800 employees. All of them do something that's significant, and all of them will give me some advice from time to time. But it's kind of sticking with less is more is often my best brand, and that perfect is often the enemy of great. Meaning that you have to find things that you can accept, that you'll love, but you'll also understand that there will be variation in quality, and that you have to be able to deal with that if it's going to affect you. So you find things that either you can do that with or you can't do that with. In terms of team members operating, I have one person in the arm of licensing food products, and we're kind of picky because I don't need to make, you don't have to make all the money this week. But as I've always said, it takes you 30 years to build a brand. It takes 2 bad weeks to totally destroy it, and you can almost damage it all in one day, as I've shown witness to. So we watch things very carefully. I'm interested in the media world, but I'm not like I know media, but I'm not a media production guy. So we have 2 people in the office that are working on developing these kind of interesting little scenes that will either be on YouTube or on our own website. But fundamentally, it's a slow grow for me. And I've been in New York City for 20 years, and I've done pretty well, I feel, about it. But I certainly haven't rushed into anything that I've had to subsequently feel really bad about.
And you have a business partner.
I have a business partner, Joe Bastianich.
And without Joe, where would the company be? How do you think about him?
We would have half as many restaurants. He's just a lot more outward bound. He's more about doing the stuff. But it worked out well. I don't think that we've made too many slip-ups. We've only closed 1 restaurant, and all the rest are still operating. So it worked out well. Joe and I are good partners in that we both see very different sides of the coin. We're both very passionate about what we do, and each of us has kind of our level of expertise, but we also know a lot about what the other one's kind of responsibilities are about. So of course, being the chef, I always have opinions about how we're doing it in the dining room, and being a critic on MasterChef, he has a lot of opinions about what goes on in the kitchen, and it's that kind of collaboration that makes things sometimes even more pleasurable than just always getting your own way, because you tend to learn more, even if proving someone wrong or being wrong yourself.
Does it matter for Joe that he's not in the spotlight the way you are? Now he is actually increasingly.
The first 10 years, it didn't bother him at all. The second 10 years, he's been getting on TV, so I think he likes it. I mean, he enjoys it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with how famous he is in Italy, but he said a couple of funny things on the national MasterChef show that now children have his voice saying "Voi che moro" as their phone ring. A comedian really picked him apart and really brought him up, and it turned out to be benign and delightful and funny, and people throw underwear at him in the middle of the street in Milan these days. It's kind of crazy.
Let's sneak in a couple more questions if we can. Right over here.
Hi, Mario. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
You seem to know a lot about pesticides, and I'm wondering if you use your brand sometimes for causes like Save the Bees or things like that. How do you feel about using your brand in that way? Or do you?
I have to identify things carefully. There's a lot of things that seem intuitively right that have a strange backbone. Certainly, bees in general is a good idea. Aligning yourself with a particular group of people who either have their charity in mind or their own economic bent forward isn't always the smartest thing to do. But I go generally with my intuition, and I sign up for things, and it depends on what it is. I was against the supplemental nutrition program cuts that the Senate threw at the House this week, and I tweeted that way, and you take your lumps with the people that don't agree with you and the kudos of people that do. I'm a little more informed about that than I am about pesticides, so I would say I feel strong enough to go back at that well a couple of times. Pesticides can't be good because they kill things, that's their nature, but I understand the use of increasing crop flow. So when you figure out what makes sense and you stick with it, you have to vet it a little bit more carefully because I'm in the public eye, but I'm not opposed to using whatever limited clout I have to doing the right thing for everything I feel.
You got a question over here.
I have a very simple question. I'm going to try and relate it to expanding your brand. There was a rumor that you were going to bring Italy to DC. Is that true?
That's a good question. Italy is going to make a pretty big expansion in the next 3 years, and what the fundamental tricky point is all about the real estate. So if you can get to a place where they'll help you build it and they'll charge you a fair enough rent that everyone can make money and they can increase a long-term asset to constantly producing income for them, and they understand that, it's great. If they want to be my partner but don't want to buy in, then they can't, and at the end of the day, we'll look at 10 markets in North America, we'll look at 20 markets in Central and South America, and we'll probably choose 6 or 7 in North America and 5 or 6 in South and Central. And at that point, then we'll get together and we'll figure out, well, is this working? Because we think it's going to work. But it's all about the real estate deal. And that's the same thing for choosing restaurants. The landlord has an asset. And if you go in and do it right, you increase the value of their asset. If you go in and do it wrong, you decrease the value of their asset. So they have to be kind of picky, and they also want to make sure they get enough skin in the game. And it's a tricky relationship, and if it works out really well, everyone's happy. There's rarely a problem if the middle amount of money is involved. But if a real shitload of money is involved or absolutely zero money involved, people get really picky.
Let's sneak in 2 more if we can. Yes.
I think you were pointing to me.
Yep.
What is your favorite meal?
My favorite meal?
Yes.
My favorite thing to eat is anything anyone else makes. I can eat a dozen oysters if someone's shucking them. If I shuck them, I eat 2. And it's because I appreciate someone taking the time to make something delicious, even if it's a bologna sandwich. But I love the fact, and the reason people are happy when I'm around is because I'm feeding them. And now I understand. Like, it's such a nice feeling to think that someone's taking the time to make something really delicious. That said, if I'm on the Amalfi Coast and I'm eating linguine with clams and my toes are in the sand, I feel even better.
Let's take one final question from you, sir, in the middle.
Thank you. You've expanded the brand so fantastically over the years. I'm just wondering, has there ever been a point where your ambition was too big and you went, oh, actually, maybe we're not quite ready to do that yet? Because, I mean, Italy was pretty phenomenal, and I think it blew everyone away, and the fact that you're talking about expanding it on the scale that you're talking about is really exciting. Just wondering if there was anything even bigger than that.
Well, we haven't ever gotten to the point where we had sunk everything in it when we realized it was a really bad idea yet. But we've had a lot of ideas that we've come down the path with and decided that it wasn't going to be, we thought about, I mean, in my dream of dreams, I love the idea of being near the water or on the water. And we thought about trying to create or participate with one of those circle line kind of things and do something along those lines. And you just can't, the nature of that size of boat and the kind of kitchen that you can have on it and the kind of food that I could make isn't good enough to be what it is. That said, if someone wants to give me $2 billion, I am quite convinced that we can create a water taxi system in the Great Lakes in North America here, where you can go to a game in Milwaukee and then head down to Chicago and then over to Traverse City. There's zillions in that eventually.
Okay, I think we got to leave it there. Mario Batali, thank you very, very much.
Thank you all.